This week on A to Z Running, runners talk about treadmill misery and loathing the indoor training season. But is it possible that the reason it's so rough is because we think it is? A recent conversation with another runner set us to thinking, and we've got some stark realities to share that will also, hopefully, change your experience with treadmills.
Hey everyone, welcome back to AtoZrunning, where we help runners thrive. I'm Andy.
And I'm Zach, and we do, in fact, have some stark realities to share. But before we do, it's not a bad moment to reflect on how nice it is when the sun comes out and it warms up just enough that most of the snow on the roads thaws off of them, and everything just feels so much better. Doesn't
It really
Doesn't
does. It does. I think, though, that it amplifies the gratitude to have some sunshine that we might have otherwise taken for granted. But when you don't see the sun for months, it is quite enjoyable to get out there and to feel the sun, to see the sun. It's
yes,
nice.
The sun. So I actually was just thinking about that this morning, maybe even this morning. Yes, it was this morning. I was just thinking about how the seasons, we often say things like, the winter makes us appreciate the summer if you live in the Midwest because you have like a serious amount of both of them. It feels like, but actually I think it's more than that. I think what I like about the seasons in particular, and what I hope to be able to find even better ways to enjoy, is that each season has a kind of tone to it and a kind of experience unique to that season. And I was reflecting on winter a little bit, and it's like, yeah, winter's like the season of death and darkness. And no. Winter is like a season of rest and quiet, and you might say like, what would be the right? Because hibernation is the theme that was coming to my head. But it's definitely, as a season, the cold and dark and everything has a way to kind of engage with that is not miserable, not misery. And I was just kind of trying to consider what that might be. And I didn't come up with a good sense of it yet, but I know there's something there, and I want to think more about it. So that's kind of where my mind is at. However, that said, for us, where we live, the sun came out in the last couple of days, and the temperature finally reached above freezing for like a sustained amount of time, meaning like 2 or 3 hours each day. And in fact, I ran a run the other day, and it was right around 40 degrees and sunny. And I thought the world was reborn. Like, I just felt like a new person while I was running. And I felt like the whole thing, everything around me was like different. And I don't mind being able to enjoy those moments, even if I know that winter is not over yet, probably where we live, but we get some respite, and that was good. But that's where the thinking kind of has been revolving a little bit lately, and so we're going to dive further into some considerations here. But I just want to say, it's okay to be really glad when spring comes as well. Everything we're about to say, it's also okay to enjoy the spring.
I always like to bring up little tidbits when they come to mind, but I've shared this before, maybe more on social media and in person with people, but someone had asked me recently about yak tracks versus other methods, and there is still a stretch, and I actually ran on it even though it was sunny. I chose a stretch that was not thawed up and clear, but it had enough traction where I felt okay. Wearing ice spikes, I feel, if you have ample coverage, is much better than yak tracks.
Oh, yeah.
So I've mentioned this tidbit to many people because that seems to be a barrier for getting outside sometimes. But if you can get ice spikes, and what those are, you use your regular trainers and you will actually screw them into your shoe. So it's your regular trainers, but you have to know that you can't reverse this process. So those then become your ice shoes.
You can reverse the process. You just have holes in the bottom.
Right. I wouldn't recommend it because little pebbles get in there. It's not a good idea. Yeah. They should remain your ice shoes, especially because you want those ice spikes to serve you again and again. So Anyway, I thought I'd throw out that little tidbit since winter is not over yet, and I've had many conversations, even as of late, about my recommendations when it comes to traction and running outdoors.
Well, that's a pretty good preface to our focus for today's topic. So let's go ahead and get right to talking about how to chase that feeling. Full confession, the title of this episode and the focus of the topic are not terribly closely connected.
What?
But it's at least a way to articulate the challenge, and that's why I titled it the way I did. But what we're trying to address here is something that we do in our decision-making process as runners, and a way to hopefully do so differently. And all of this came from what was planned to be a completely different topic until I had a conversation with another runner, only a few days ago, in fact, from when we're saying this on the microphone. And I just got kind of stuck on the thought for a little bit. And I was like, we need to talk about this more, because we've addressed the concepts and talked about these things certainly throughout the past. And every winter we have to at least talk a little bit about treadmills and indoor training and such, if for no other reason to encourage you all as runners who might be having to run in the winter and help our thinking to keep moving forward. But this conversation just reminded me of some of the core truths that we need to grapple with as we're doing these kinds of things. And so if you're finding yourself running in the sunshine right now and it's 40 plus degrees and you're saying, Zach, I don't care about the thing you're talking about because it's so nice, just remember it won't be forever. And this is a good thing to remember. But it's relevant to things outside of the treadmill also, right. And that will make those connections as well. So here's the context. We were talking, I and this other runner were talking about treadmill and training in winter conditions. And I have to say, for this runner, he has been very successful this winter in rehabilitating a fall injury, as well as getting into a really solid core foundation or base of training. And pretty much all of it's been on the treadmill. Mm-hmm. And that's not easy to do for a lot of runners. Things like 2-hour runs on the treadmill and longer. And all of that, like coming off of an injury where we're already kind of in a slightly discouraged state most of the time. Most of us are. And yet he's been able to achieve a significant body of work with what you might consider to be less than desirable circumstances across the board. And so I was asking him how he feels like he's been able to be successful within that, and sharing some of his experiences there. We were talking as he was sharing that, we were talking about how so many of us just feel like it's awful. Running on the treadmill is terrible. Indoor training is terrible. And the dark and not having, pleasant weather and all of that kind of stuff. And so here's what he said. There were two things that came out of the conversation. The first was both of us kind of talking about together. The second one, then he shared, and it just like blew my mind. So the first was the mindset part of it, and specifically the optimism versus pessimism debate here. And we were talking about how, in particular, I was saying that I feel like it's really important for me to change the way I describe the thing in my head. Or you might say, because this is the way we framed it in the past, I change the story I'm telling myself about the thing in my head. And so for treadmills, we predominantly tell ourselves a terrible story. Like, it's miserable, it's boring, it's harder than running outside, and that's no fun. It's so repetitive, it's, all these things. And it's just all negative stories. But not only am I telling myself that, I'm also telling all the people around me who are also runners that. And you see the thing. You've been in those circles where we're all lamenting the treadmill together, and misery loves company and all of that, right? But the reality is, as you know, the thing that I tell myself about something is the thing I believe about that thing. And if I want treadmill running to be miserable, I should continue doing that, because it will definitely continue being miserable. However, if I don't want treadmill running to be miserable, I should change that story.
Repeat thoughts are meditation. So if we are meditating on the negativity, then we're going to increase our anxiety. And of course, we're going to feel more negative. So the things we repeat to ourselves do matter. And that's why there are practices of meditation that are performative, like increase your performance, but also increase your enjoyment as well. So when you think about the reverse and speaking those negative things over and over and over again, we're actually training our mind in a negative way, which I am also guilty of doing, everyone. But it is true that we need to discuss how we talk about the treadmill and reframe that thinking. And as Zach said, retell the story.
Yeah. Yeah. So that thought, we'll kind of put a bookmark on that one for a moment. That thought, was in my mind, I was like, that's the key. I think that's the key. And part of it was just speaking from my own experience, because I have been able to change. Like, I look forward to running on the treadmill most of the time currently. Not every single day, not every single run, but most of the time I look forward to running on the treadmill. There are some exceptions, and they often have to do with whether it's a choice or whether it's a necessity and other contexts. But anyway, so the reason I tend to look forward to the treadmill is because I've created a circumstance in my mind that I enjoy about that, and the treadmill's a part of that equation. And so that has made a difference. I'm talking with this runner, and I'm saying, I think that that's the key. And he's like, well, I have another thought, though. And this is where he was like, but that's not the only problem. He said that the other problem is, I'm going to try to get it as close to, because I actually like wrote down what he said, because it was, I was like, I need to remember this. He said, I think part of the problem is we, talking about runners, get on a treadmill and just set it for the same speed we would normally run.
Mm-hmm.
And we think we should be running the same thing on a treadmill as we do when we're running outside. And he said, but that's not right. And I'm like, you are correct. That's not right.
Ding, 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 ding.
Not right. And so then he and I started just kind of spiraling around this concept, talking through it a little bit to get a clearer sense. And the key takeaway, the key draw at the front, as he was sharing, the thing he was trying to articulate is that treadmill is not the same thing as running on solid ground. And we should actually treat it like a different kind of activity. It's obviously serving a similar purpose, and in fact a very similar purpose, but we should still treat it like a different kind of activity. And if we did, then it would totally change the way we approach our expectations around the treadmill.
This is a conversation that I have a lot, and this is a hurdle that I've had to overcome this year, because it's always been that I have to run slower for the same effort on the treadmill, I feel. But then we got a different treadmill, and it's even more exaggerated. And it's good, though, because then I can actually say to some of my athletes, hey, I run minutes slower sometimes per mile, and it's the same effort. So if you feel feels like the same effort. And I think that that's a good conversation, and I think that Kyle hit it on the head there, because that is one of the big barriers in our discouragement. That's where that negative mental spiral can start, or it can be reinforced, is when we look at that treadmill speed and it feels harder than we think it should. It's that mismatch theory coming up again. We bring it up all the time. But if we're expecting one thing and we see another and it's negative, we're kind of feeling wah about it. I do want to mention a story, because I have a youth runner. I don't coach many youth runners, but I do have one right now. And this runner just began for the first time running on treadmills. And this was very difficult for her. Very, very, very. And I'm so grateful that she is so honest, because I had her doing an easy run. And I asked her, like, I had her rate between 1 and 10 the effort. And she was honest with me that it was like an 8. And I was like, you got to slow it down, dial it back. And it was a great learning experience for her. And I think it's good that I was able to share that with her, to give her permission to slow it down. It doesn't mean you're slower. It doesn't mean that you're getting slower. Mm-hmm. It just means that the stimulus is different, and it was new for her, which is part of it too. So I wanted to add that little piece in, another example.
And let's remember, so this is a good, let's take this case study now with this runner. How would you rate effort in terms of perception? And let's apply all the things that could have changed that in that moment that we know. Things that have been clearly studied and identified. So for instance, you take that same treadmill and you put it in a room that is surrounded by windows, and that relative effort goes down. Like you run the exact same speed for the same time, and suddenly it doesn't feel as bad. Or put that same treadmill next to someone else on a treadmill who you're talking with or you're chatting with. Relative effort goes down. Or
unless they're going really fast and you feel like you're going really slow compared to them. That's why you should always put a towel over your mattress.
Yeah. Okay. But we can always find exceptions. But also, take that same treadmill room and put it in front of a TV that's showing like a run along a nature trail, and throw a couple of plants in that room, and now the relative effort goes down. And so you take into account like all these things are influencing this. And what is it? Why is it that treadmill is so difficult? Because most of the time you're in a cave with bad, like no natural anything, lighting or scenery or otherwise. Most of the time you're isolated, like all of the things that we know make our perceived effort higher. And then you add in things like negative perception, where you already don't feel good about the treadmill. Like the treadmill's a miserable thing. And if that's your perception, your actual perceived effort will be higher, simply on account of the fact that you're telling yourself that story. So that's a good example. That's a great example.
This is a side note, was not something written down, but also a lot of us don't do the same warm up that we do outside.
So
because we're indoors, so you're not
quite
quite as ready to run. So when you begin running, you're not as ready and you feel worse. So let's remember that piece of it.
That could be it too. Yep, that could be it too. So we take all of those things into account, and that doesn't even account for the fact that the treadmill is not the same thing as running outside. And so now here's where we get into the crux of the conversation that I had with this other runner. We want the information, the running data coming from our treadmill to show us the same thing as the running data show us when we are outside. And it shouldn't, because they're not the same kind of activity. And so we have to now apply the same logic to the treadmill consideration that we would to any other kind of, this is a different activity that I'm doing. And especially when I first start doing it. So on the one side, it's like we don't get on the elliptical and say, well, if I'm not ellipticaling at this speed, then it's not good. It's not a good workout. Well, I guess some people might do that, but I haven't seen very many people do that. We don't get on a bike and say, if the bike is not exactly 2 times faster per mile than my running outside, then it's not the right kind of workout. Like, we don't apply this linear 1-to-1 comparison to other kinds of activities. Now, I will say, I have talked with runners who do actually do that with the bike. Stop. Don't do it. But that's aside. So most of us don't. And yet with the treadmill, we do. We say the treadmill and the run outside should be the same. That doesn't make sense, because why don't we with the elliptical and the bike? Because they're not the same activity. So that's one of those kinds of considerations. Also then, if that's the case, then we should actually create a unique set of expectations when we're on the treadmill. Like, this is what my exercise, my workout with the treadmill should look like. Not relative to running outside, but relative to the treadmill, to itself. And so I have to build, and this is how it works with these things, I have to build adaptations to the treadmill by running on the treadmill, and then create expectations relative to that foundation that I establish. And so as I'm running on the treadmill and my body's getting more used to it, now I know, okay, about this speed is a good place to start when I'm getting into an easy run. And about this speed is where I'll kind of like turn it up a little bit. Because a treadmill, you have to control the speed. It's a little bit harder for it to be natural. It's for it to be organic. It's contrived no matter what, because you have to press a button to say a thing on a treadmill. And I guess unless you have that free run setting on the kicker. But I've heard mixed things. I've heard mixed reports about that. We'll come back to that another time. So the treadmill is going to always be contrived, but I can establish a kind of natural range of where I should anticipate setting things for different kinds of runs. And that should only be relative to my experiences on the treadmill, not what pace I want to see because of what I run races in or because of what I do when I'm running easy outside.
And the very common tip is that it shouldn't be the same the whole entire time for your incline and for your pace. Yeah. It's good for you to go up and go down and go up, but not like dramatically unless you're doing that kind of workout. But I really do think that is really helpful, especially when reducing risk of injury, because a lot of our injuries are overuse injuries as runners. There are some that are different than that, but overuse injuries happen quite often. And on the treadmill, it's very common. So I think it's good to add some variety.
We have been theorizing. So this is an unproven theory that as of yet I have not seen any kind of documented attempt to research this. Maybe someone has, and I haven't encountered it. But we have theorized that runners will say to us, like, I feel like I get injured more easily when I'm on the treadmill in the winter than, like, I almost always have some kind of injury happening on the treadmill. And why is that? And our theory is, in part at least, because, yes, exactly what Andy said. When you're on the treadmill, you're doing essentially the exact same motion, very nearly the exact same motion for a stretch of time. When you're outside, there's the small nuances of the changes of
the curve,
incline, decline, the curve of the road, the crowning of the road. But then also, you are moving your body more when you're outside. You're turning and looking. You're looking around. You're not just like looking straight ahead. And so your shoulders are changing position occasionally. Your arms are changing position more often. And on a treadmill, we tend to just set something and then leave it for significant lengths of time. Let's say you do occasionally make changes, and it's like maybe every 20 minutes you change something, or every half an hour. Even then, you're running 20 minutes where the incline, the ankle angle, is exactly the same, basically the whole time, where there's no bevel in your side to side, where there's no change in your knee lift and drive. Like, those things are all the same. So that's why, as Andy's saying, like, things like tinkering with the incline and the speed, even just little bits, just make slight changes to those things, and you should do it regularly throughout. But in principle, we think that that's no small part of why people do seem to get hurt in a kind of predictable and consistent manner when they are stuck on the treadmill for long stretches of time, which in part is because of this kind of final reflection. Whenever you start a new activity, like something you haven't been doing regularly, the logic that should always apply is you ease into it. We talk about that as athletes generally. When I begin a new weight training routine, I don't do the full number of reps and sets 3 days a week the very first week. Like, I start with lower weight and ease up. I start with fewer reps and then ease in, or I do only half the sets the first couple times, like all that kind of stuff. Same thing should apply with the treadmill. Like, day one on the treadmill shouldn't be, I was going to run 90 minutes outside today, and now I'm going to just run 90 minutes on the treadmill at the same speed. That's a bad idea. We need our body to acclimate and adapt to the differences of the treadmill. And no small part of that is that repetitiveness, that significantly less flexible movement mechanic.
And when we are adding diversity into our speed and incline, I think it's really important to just remember, I had to remind myself this too, but you're going to have to go slower than you really even want to go at some points in order to add some variety, because otherwise you're going to make it a workout where you're running easy and then you're running hard and then you're running easier, and you're going more toward the end of running a little too hard. So if we're going to add variety on an actual easy day, you need to also go what you would think is under effort for some of it in order to be able to have that variety and still maintain the right effort.
Right on. So let's zoom out and let's draw some connections, not just with the treadmill. So these two big concepts that I've just been chewing on now since this conversation with a runner. The first was so how I think about a thing affects how I feel about that thing. Obviously, naturally, that's going to be the case. So if I don't want to dread something, I need to see the good in it. It's kind of all there is to it. It's actually very simple. And in fact, I say it's simple. It's also easy. This is one of those things where it's not hard to do. It just requires some intentionality. And so I can find a way to think good about something, to think well about something, pretty much no matter what it is. It's possible. And so it's not a question of tricking myself into like just telling myself this is good and eventually I'll believe it. Although that is partly true, by the way. It is partly true. If you just don't let yourself think that it's bad, you'll think that it's bad less. But what I do fundamentally is, okay, so it starts with things like I'm hanging out with runners and they're talking about how bad the treadmill is. I'm like, are you kidding me? I love the treadmill. I enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to my winter treadmilling. And here's why. And give some reason or another. And so I don't allow the conversation to always be negative around me. I influence some positive amount. But also then in my own head, I can't let myself think, oh, treadmill again. I have to change that internal story. And that's going to be the key. And so think about the other things. I mean, there's so much of this. I talk with runners all the time who will say things like, I really hate this kind of workout. And so whenever I'm getting to this part of my training, it's like I have to do this kind of workout. And it's like, oh, that again. Talk to runners who's like, yeah, I really, really don't like long runs because they're just so boring. Like if I can't do a long run with another person, it's really hard for me to get through it. And it's like, we just got to find a way to tell ourselves something different about it.
Yeah, if you have known me for very long, you know that I just am always talking about gratitude as a way for me to reshape the story and retell the story with more positivity. And I just do think that with the treadmill, there's so much to be grateful for. Like if you have access to a treadmill, that's amazing. And you can be cozy in your home. You're safe, you're warm, you're well. I think that there's just a lot to be grateful for in that. And spinning toward the direction of like, oh, wow, this is a great opportunity. I don't have to go run outside today. I can do it down in my basement and crank some jams and play my favorite TV show, whatever it is that you get to do that you wouldn't get to do outside. There's definitely going to be some key points.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. So that's the first part. And then the second part was the stop trying to apply expectations from one context to another. This one is actually significantly more necessary to our long-term success as runners. I think the other one makes our experience better, but we could still be successful, you could say. This one is necessary for success because what we do then is take the treadmill context aside, and what we do is we say, if I see X when I do Y, I should also see X when I do Z. And mathematically, logically, there's a reason why I just chose to express that mathematically, because that isn't true. That is a false statement. So when you talk about concepts like proofs, anyone out there who likes math and math teachers, if your student were to try to use that as a proof, you would say, no, that's not true. But we do it in real life a lot. And so let me give you a couple more examples. If I see X when I ran a week ago, I should see X when I run today. But those are 2 different days. And that means that there's a number of factors that have changed the context, many, in fact, and some of them can change it in a strong enough way that our body physiologically is not necessarily capable of the same exact thing.
So X is not equal X on a different day. It'd be like right. X plus 1.
Right, exactly. Like oh, I love it. Andy just went straight, Matt. Speaking my love language right now. So good. Algebra is one of the best things on the planet. So here's what happens then is what we do is we say, well, but we have to be able to think that way because how else can you know, like, if your body can produce this thing, that means your body can produce this thing again, right? And so there's a kind of principle there that says that by necessity has to be true in some sense, but yet historically and anecdotally, and this is why this is so fascinating to me, anecdotally, that's actually disproven significantly more often than it's proven at every level. Think about the professional runners. How often does a pro break the world record and then easily do it again another time? You know, it's like the same person who ran this time 2 weeks later struggled and wasn't anywhere close to that time. Or the exact opposite. Felt like, oh, last time this was really, really hard. And then I did it 2 weeks later and it was a piece of cake. Well, what, are you in so much better shape after 2 weeks? That no, there could be things, but no, it's just a different context. And so what we have to be able to do then, taking into account this runner's advice with the treadmill, is we have to treat it like a new thing, but we have to have confidence in our capabilities. And our capabilities should not be based in performance metrics. Our capabilities should be based in what we can endure and how we can exert. And if we do that, then the answer is we can produce all sorts of positive results and even defy our own expectations without being transfixed by the numbers.
And a little side note, even with the numbers, they aren't going to be matching most of the time anyway. Most treadmills are not tuned every few months. So
that's a whole nother.
Well, what I'm saying is the data that you might be
but...
seeing, the data you might be seeing that you're discouraged about might not even be real. So
yeah,
don't be discouraged. Go by effort. We always say that anyway, but just another shove towards it.
Yeah, and just take every day as it is and what it gives you, and take each experience as in a reasonable approach. This is all about just being reasonable and applying that kind of intuition to each experience we're having. Mm-hmm. And so that's where we find ourselves right now as we've been reflecting on these things from this runner. Yeah, go ahead.
I just have one more thing. I'm always coming up with these little thoughts here and there, but I do think that pairing treadmill running with strength training, making sure you're well activated, is really important. And this, again, is a theory, but I did talk to a PT about this, and they think that I might be right about it. But I think that we sometimes will neglect muscle groups in recruitment on the treadmill. For instance, the hamstrings. Often, because it's like pulling your foot up because of the motion of the belt, you're not always using your hamstring to pull up, and then you're overusing hip flexors. Anyway, all that to say, I think, as a tip, pairing treadmill running with regular strength training activation is a great idea.
You know what we need? We need, like, as the human race, we need someone to develop a very simple way to detect muscle contractions, which is not a hard thing to do. They can do this, but I don't know how you do this while someone's running on the treadmill, right? Detect muscle contractions so that at every single time a muscle contracts, that it's mapped in some clear way. And then you can plug someone into this thing, and it can be wireless ideally, so you could run anywhere with this. And then what we need to do is we need to test, like when you're running on a road versus a trail versus grass versus a treadmill, when you're running faster efforts, higher efforts, lower efforts, when you're running with other people, like how are the muscle contractions differing? And like which muscles are firing and not firing as higher or lower amounts? That would be the information that would solve all these problems.
All of them, Zach. All of them.
Yes.
Even our negativity problems.
Yep. All of them. Well, anyway, so now you know what we've been thinking about quite a bit the last several days. And we'll come back to our plan. In fact, we have a new book that we've been reading, or at least I have, and Andy will find out about it here soon. We have a new book that we are going to share with you as we come together. Next time you hear from us, we'll be starting to talk about it, and we'll spend a few episodes on it because it's pretty dense. It's good to unpack, and so you can anticipate it. If you want to do some reading ahead of time to be ready, you can do that. The book is How to Change by Katie Milkman. So give it a read if you want to preface, or just jump to AI and have it summarize it for you, because who reads anything anymore anyway?
Hey.
As a matter of fact, don't even read the AI's response. Tell it to speak it to you, and then you don't have to read a single word to know about this book.
Wow.
Or you can do the better thing and read the book. Either way, that's what we're going to be talking about next time you hear from us, and so you can anticipate if we just told you about things that you feel like are hard for you to accomplish because it involves change, well, next up, we're going to tell you how to change. But before we do any of that, we need to move on to everyone's favorite game, running trivia segment. All right, everybody. It's time for everyone's favorite segment, running trivia. And before we start, I have to issue a correction. So we tried a different AI service last time we did trivia, and it was actually wrong on at least one of the questions.
And what you didn't hear is that we started this segment and she was wrong.
The whole time.
It was wrong the entire time. So
what Andy's means, we tried to record this segment once already today, and you're not going to hear any of it because we just scrapped the whole thing because the AI just kept giving us incorrect things. And so we're like, okay, you are terrible. So we are going back to the previous AI service that we had been using for running trivia, and it's going to be much better. And that's all there is to it. So let's jump back to our AI running trivia. Here we go. Flip it on. All right, we're back. We're for our AI running trivia segment with our A to Z running audience. And this time our topic is going to be rules violations, like doping or other kinds of rules violations from the 1990s, specifically in the sport of running. So go ahead and give us our first question. Remember to give us 4 possible answers, one of them being correct.
All right, here's your first question about the 1990s. In 1993, which well-known male distance runner had his World Championship gold medal stripped due to a doping violation? Here are your options. 1, Dieter Baumann. 2, Ben Johnson. 3, Richard Ostrowski. 4, Ezine Hatem. Make your choice.
All right. Do you have any guess yet? Do you know what you're going to guess?
Yes.
You can see. I know what I'm going to guess. 3, 2, 1, go. Ooh, I guessed Dieter Baumann, and you guessed Ryszard Ostrowski. What was the correct answer?
The correct answer is actually Dieter Baumann. He was famously known for testing positive in 1993, and he had to give up his gold. So if you guessed him, you got it right.
Good job, Zach.
You should have guessed Dieter Baumann because the other AI kept putting his name into things. There was a reason for that.
I didn't pay attention to that.
Yeah, I know. Okay, all right. Give us another question. Same topic. Remember, the topic is rules violations from the 1990s. Give us the next question.
All right, here's another one for you. In 1997, a female marathon runner was famously disqualified after winning the Boston Marathon due to using a banned substance. Who was that athlete? Here are your options. 1, Tegla Larupe. 2, Liza Hunter-Galvan. 3, Fatuma Roba. 4, Olga Appel. Take your pick.
Oh, no. Any guesses? Do you know who?
I don't know, but
I have
I'm going to guess.
no idea. I'm just going to go with random. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. I guessed number 2. You guessed number 4. Okay, we don't know, but what was the correct answer?
The correct answer is actually Olga Appel. She was disqualified after winning Boston due to a banned substance.
Oh.
So if you pick number 4, you nailed it.
1 and 1. All right, we got the tiebreaker for the day. Here we go. We're tied up 1-1. We need one more question. Remember, the topic is rules violations from the 1990s. Go ahead.
All right, here's your tiebreaker. In the 1992 Barcelona Olympics, a high-profile 100-meter sprinter was banned shortly after the Games for doping. Who was that sprinter? Here are your options. 1, Dennis Mitchell. 2, Linford Christie. 3, Frank Motmo. 4, Bruni Surin. Take your pick.
Any guesses? I don't know. Only 2 of these names even sound familiar to me. And I'm not sure if that's because they're real people or just they sound familiar.
All right, I got my guess, too.
3, 2, 1, go! Oh, we both guessed the same. We both guessed Dennis Mitchell. What was the correct answer?
Well, you both followed your instincts correctly. The answer is Dennis Mitchell. He was indeed banned shortly after the 1992 Olympics for doping. So, well done. You both got that one right.
Well, that makes a tie day. We both
Tie
get
day.
2 points, but Andy is still leading 4-2 now for total score, which means we gotta see if Zach can catch up. It's hard. 2 points is a big gap to make up. Like, we've never won the trivia by more than about 2 points, and so now I gotta reverse it. I don't know how, but we're gonna have to try. Okay, so here's your goal. When you listen to the running trivia segment, you gotta play along, certainly, but you also need to fact check some things.
We're fact
with
checking,
us.
though. We are.
Because
After the fact, though, so.
Well, the reality is it's interesting to, like, we're learning some things, but we probably learn even more because of the fact-checking experiences, and that's what just helps us to uncover some really fascinating realities here. So all fascination for us in the running trivia segment. Now Andy's leading the charge by 2 points, 4-2. Remember, the first to 10 gets a prize. So See if
And
she can
Zach's
pull it
won the
off.
last 2 prizes. So
The only 2 prizes. We've only played 2 full rounds.
everybody
so
root
far.
for me.
Keep it going. All right. Well, that's about it for running trivia. So I think we're ready now to move on to the latest from the world of running. All right, here we go. We've got some interesting and exciting things to share with you. Lots going on. Before we get to the news around the globe, let's talk about some quick shout outs for A to Z running members, those that we support. Shout outs for those who ran the Groundhog Marathon. Violet won the race, first overall. Congrats. And Mary was third overall. So 2 on the podium is not a bad representation for A to Z running, if I do say so. And then in Arizona, running the full marathon over there, Kate ran an outstanding performance. In fact, only 75 seconds off her lifetime best, which she ran 20 years ago. And so how about that? Incredible. Craig ran the half marathon, and a shout out to TJ, who ran 5K in just a low-key effort, and yet was pretty impressive for a low-key effort at that too. So lots of exciting things going on. More to come. And in the international world of running, we've got a lot of different things going on in a lot of different places. So let's talk about Femke Bol in the 800 for a second. Femke Bol is the world record holder in the indoor 400 meters, and she is the world number 2 fastest 400-meter hurdler. So Femke Bol is a quarter miler by specialty. And then one day, not terribly long ago, she announced she's going to move up to the 800, which that kind of thing just doesn't really happen in track and field, but it's really exciting when it does because you never know how it's going to go. Well, she had her debut 800 meters just 1 week ago, and it went fairly well, but it did not shock the world, which I think is just fascinating to me. She went out hot. She was on sub 158 pace, which would be top tier globally all time in the indoor 800 meters, and yet struggled late and ended up running 159.07, which is kind of not quite as incredible, but it was still a national record. Her first ever 800 meters. She runs a national record. She runs under 2 minutes indoors. That is very impressive. And what it should tell people is, watch out. Femke Bol is good at the 800 also. And she was really good at other stuff, so who's to say how fast she will get. Now, what I want to do next is basically just fly through a high-level recap of a number of really incredible things that have been going on. Let's start with a new world record in the 4x800 meters relay. That is a obscure event if ever there was one. The Atlanta Track Club men ran a new world record, which is just really interesting and exciting. They ran 7:10, which was a full second off the previous record. 7:10 is an average of 147.5. So that's not hard. That's not easy to do in general for people going together. Now, as you would know, these are kind of obscure records. And so if you took the 4 fastest 800 meter runners in the world right now and said, hey, run a relay together and set a new world record, they would because they're much faster than 147 800 meter runners. But that kind of thing just doesn't happen. So props to Atlanta Track Club. Got a world record. Mohamed Ataoui, speaking of world-class 800-meter runners, ran a European 1,000-meter indoor record when he ran 2:14.52, only a third of a second off the world record. Good for world number 3 all-time, only behind Suleiman and none other than Josh Hoey, who's world number 2. Funny quote afterwards from Ataoui. He says, I regret announcing the world record attempt as I was quite nervous. And then that makes sense because he said he was going to try for the world record. And then he realized, oh my goodness, now the pressure's on. And that's hard to cope. But he did well. He did do well. Elliot Cruikshank of Great Britain ran world number 4, 800 meters indoor when he went 1:43.83. Sorry, I said Great Britain, but that is not where he's from. And so he ran world number 4 all time, which is very strong, very impressive. Audrey Vero ran a Swiss 800-meter record in 1:57.49, which is also world number 10 all time indoors. That is incredible. Agatha Guillermo of France ran a new national record, 4:23.27 in the mile. 4:23 mile, Very strong performance. And then Wayne Kaladi, this is actually two things. Wayne Kaladi announced quite suddenly that she was leaving Under Armour. Well, she announced it a little while ago. And then come to find out who she left Under Armour for is Nike. And so Wayne Kaladi's running for Nike. And in her, I think, her first race for Nike, she ran a new national record in the half marathon. So that looks good for the brand. Hopefully she has a really good bonus contract with Nike, and that was one of the reasons she made the change, because if so, she just nabbed a sizable bonus for the very first thing she did, running for the brand, which would be cool. She was second in the Barcelona half, running 66:04, which is 5 seconds faster than her own national record. And so I like it. I chop just little bits off of it, and then you can keep hitting it over and over. That's a really good way to do it. By the way, USA's Taylor Rowe was also fourth in that race, which is a very strong showing for the Americans at an international half marathon. She ran under 67, 106.52 as well. Remember Sam Ruth, the teenage sensation? Well, people have been talking about him and talking to him quite a bit lately, as they would. He ran 3:48 in the mile. Now everyone's like, how is that possible? Steve Magnus apparently has a reflection on how he thinks Sam Ruth is able to do that. I have not yet investigated the full extent of Magnus's reflection, but I'm interested in it. But one of the contemplations is, what is his training like? And come to find out, he apparently has not run any longer than 10.5 miles as his longest run. And people are like, wow, that's not very long. But he's only 16 years old, and he only has been running for a few years. So why would he run longer than that? He shouldn't, in fact, be running tons of volume, because that would not be good for him. Not that early in his life and running career. So fascinating stuff, right? And we'll try to look into more and get for you some more interesting information about the teenage sensations and the kinds of things that define their experiences. There's also been some not great news in the universe of running. Jakob Ingebrigtsen, the great Ingebrigtsen, just had surgery. And we've known about his Achilles problems for a bit now, but it apparently was not something that was responding to rehabilitation, and so he ended up getting a kind of Achilles surgery. He was very quick to what's the right word, to try to help us not feel badly about it, because he kept saying, well, it's not a major thing, it's just a surgery on the sheath around the tendon, not the tendon itself. An Achilles tendon surgery is basically like game over for runners, but in this case it's like, no, it's Achilles tendon sheath, and so he should be back to running like apparently within just a couple of weeks. Like it's a 3 to 8 week kind of recovery period, which is pretty incredible when you think about Achilles surgery. But that is kind of the way these things work. It depends significantly on the circumstance. It's interesting when you think about the progression recently, and this is part of the reflection. He, recall last year, ran a new world record in the indoor mile, and then was the double indoor gold medalist in indoor track. And then come outdoor track and field, he ended up probably doing some of that stuff, aggravated that Achilles, and then he ended up running almost nothing, and he didn't race at all until the World Championships in September, where he had a very bad showing, and so relative to his own performance. And so it was like, clearly something's wrong. Well, it turns out something was, and now he's had surgery on it. And so he won't be back to racing for a while. This is definitely the right year to get surgery, because it's also no summer world championships this year. And so he's got plenty of time to hopefully rehabilitate and be back at the sport. He certainly has confirmed his intent to do so. Another big doping violation ban just recently announced. Bernard Koech of Kenya, 5th in the Paris 10,000 meters, the Olympic 10,000 meters. And his case, though, is even more interesting than some of the ones we've been hearing lately. So, as we know, the doping scene is very sophisticated. And one of the reasons why people get away with stuff is because the rule breakers are ahead of the rule enforcers. That's generally true always with this kind of stuff. But that just means that they're finding new ways to break the rules before the officials can figure out how to stop them or catch them. And so what happened here in this case, it's incredible. The reason that they caught him was not because he had some kind of banned substance in his system, but because over the course of a series of tests, officials noticed that in after the fact review, noticed that there were serious variations in things like his hemoglobin levels. And as they were reviewing the quantity of the variation, the degree of variation, they started to uncover through, certainly research around that's not actually possible naturally. Like, you cannot have that much variation unless there's something unnatural happening. And as we know, one of the more common ways that people can get away with rules violations is through practices like blood doping or those types of things where you're changing your hemoglobin levels. And so that may be, this is all alleged. His ban has been issued, but we don't know necessarily all of those kinds of details without digging further into it. So, the review panel determined that it's not possible and therefore banned him. And that just reminds us how sophisticated, like, that is not someone who, my coach gave me this thing or my agent gave me this thing and said, take this supplement, and it turns out it was banned. It's not that kind of thing. Like, you're talking about things like injections and sustained practices over time. That is serious stuff, and we need to eradicate it from the sport. That's very disappointing. So there you go, another major profile ban, and raising more questions probably than giving answers. What system is behind that kind of cheating? Because that's not an individual athlete doing that kind of stuff. Okay, so how about we're going to end on a positive note then, and because there's even more exciting things that happened even more recently. We're talking about Valentine's weekend now. Really exciting races all around the world. It was incredible stuff. Cole Hocker at the Sound Running Invitational, A6 Invitational, dropped an astounding 3:45.94 mile for a new American record and world number 2 all time, only bested by Jakob Ingebrigtsen's sensational mile record last year. Remember when Yard Nagus set a new world indoor mile record last year, and then like a week later, maybe 2 weeks later, Ingebrigtsen broke it, and that was very disappointing for Nagus because he couldn't even hold the record for very long. Well, that was a very, very strong performance by Ingebrigtsen, and Hocker was not far off of it in largely a solo effort. It was the Pacers ahead of him and a few runners behind him until he started picking it up late in the race when the Pacers had dropped, and it was just him by himself just cranking. And he did a phenomenal job, which is, by the way, and he spoke to this in a post-race interview, Cole Hocker's weakness tends to be, historically has been, there's other guys with much faster times than him, and it's like, can he run that fast, or does he just race championship races well? Well, he's been proving. He last year ran the 3,000 meters, world number 2, the only bested by Grant Fisher in the same race together. So like clearly he's got fast times there. And then here, world number 2 in the indoor mile. He's doing it. He's doing it. That's exciting. Also, Cooper Lutkenhouse ran, remember the 17-year-old sensation, the teenage professional, and he ran 1:44:03 in the 800 meters, which is world number 6 all time indoors. And that is a very impressive performance at any age, but in particular, given his youth. The Utes. So continuing on at the Boston Valentine Invitational, Ellie St. Pierre in the mile, and they had timing mats or timing locations for the 1500 as well within the race. She ran 4:17 in the mile, and tying up in the end just missed the American record, which was tragic because she was definitely on pace for it. How do we know that? Because she actually did run the American record through the 1,500 meter split. So she did officially, because it's an official split time, she did get a 1,500 meter American record in 3:59:33 indoors. But she just missed the full mile record, which would have been fun to get 2 records in one race. That happens. And yet, behind her, 3 women, 3 bested the previous NCAA mile record. Those 3, anyone have any guesses? Like, just what names come to mind when we say new NCAA record? Riley Chamberlain of BYU, Wilma Nielsen, and Jane Hedengren, of course, right? Except who was fastest of the three? It was Riley Chamberlain this time, who ran 4:20.61. That is almost 3 seconds faster than the previous NCAA record. All three of them under the previous record. So we have 3 new all-time fastest NCAA miles. That's incredible stuff. Chamberlain and Hedengren are both Americans. Wilma Nielsen, I cannot remember. I think she's Swedish. She's from Europe somewhere. Running for Oregon, maybe? And Keely Hodgkinson, also running record-breaking times. She ran an indoor 800 meters and ran a new British indoor 800-meter record. It was her own record, so she bested her own time. She ran 1:56.33. That is the fastest 800 meters run indoors in 24 years. Since the year 2002, no one has run faster than that, and it is world number 3 all time. So as you might guess, the very next thing that Hodgkinson said is she's going for the world record next week. So stay tuned, because Levin indoor track meet, another Gold Tour or whatever they call it, world-class meet, is happening next weekend, and we've got another record-breaking attempt. We're just going to keep it going. Why not? All the exciting things, all the fast things, there's just lots to be said, and it's a blast. We love it. So between that, track and field doing its thing, some road running always going on, and is always fast, and the Winter Olympics, which doesn't really have anything to do with running at all, but it's still exciting. And so there's just lots that is fun, and we're enjoying that. We hope you are as well, and we're looking forward to continuing as we now begin a short series in the coming episodes on how to change. And so if you're looking forward to getting into some rigorous scholarly reflections, as well as some practical training applications for running, that's where we're headed next. And if you want to get some reading done ahead of time, you can check out How to Change by Katie Milkman and look at some of the science of behavior change when we talk with you next time. Thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon.